Hi there. I'm Ted Rall, editorial cartoonist, columnist, and occasional conflict reporter, talking to you about the latest from Gaza. A few weeks ago, from an international and domestic U.S. PR standpoint, Israel might have been able to bring its war in Gaza in for a hard landing. Not anymore. It's painted itself into a major corner. Gaza has effectively been destroyed. By this time next year, so will Israel. Not its physical plant, but its current status as a privileged, funded, protected nation state. The damage inflicted thus far is so severe and thorough that the Gaza Strip will be uninhabitable for the foreseeable future, at least for several years. All or more of the 2.3 million residents of Gaza, who are now being transformed into refugees, will be permanently displaced. Nothing's going to change that. If a left-wing Israeli government were to come to power, unilaterally end the war, and offer the Palestinians their own sovereign independent republic side by side with Israel, Gaza would still need to be rebuilt. That would cost tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars conservatively. In the meantime, the Jewish state would also have to provide long-term housing and public assistance for more than 2 million Palestinians throughout years of reconstruction. Here's a quote from Raphael Cohen. He's a senior political scientist at the Rand Corporation, speaking to the Associated Press. You'll end up having displaced people living in tents for a long time. But where? Assuming that a new regime could muster the necessary political consensus and address the ensuing security concerns surrounding a massive population of internally displaced people. Israel is a small country. It has fewer than 10 million people, has high unemployment, an aging population. Israel really can't afford such a massive undertaking or the demographics to quickly absorb 2 million traumatized Palestinians, effectively increasing their internal population by more than 20%. De facto, Gaza has been ethnically cleansed. Gazans have been herded from the north, which has been flattened, down to the south, against which IDF airstrike targeters and ground forces are now turning their attention. The vast majority of the population is now massed just a few miles away from the Rafah border crossing into the Sinai Peninsula. All that remains now is for the Israelis to expel the traumatized and radicalized Palestinians into the Egyptian desert. More likely, Israel will simply open the gate. The Gazans enter the Sinai of their own accord. Where else can they go? There's no home to which they can return. This second Nakba, the tragedy, as they called the 1948 expulsion of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes, will occur early next year, which will leave the ruins of Gaza desolate and dangerous. Spurred by legitimate public health concerns, Israeli bulldozers will roll in, cart away the rubble and the tens of thousands of rotting corpses trapped underneath. Demining experts will have to come in and disarm tens of thousands of unexploded bombs. That's a process that can require decades. The end result? 141 square miles of prime beachfront property. Real estate developers had poured nothing more than a vacuum along a scenic coastline. Sandals Gaza City will look smashing jammed next to Club Med Khan Yunis. This was the thinking behind the Israeli intelligence officials who wrote a thinking memo that suggested that the situation be exploited as a rare opportunity to drive out all the locals so they could seize and annex the entire territory of Gaza. The revelations that Netanyahu's government obtained Hamas's detailed plans for the incursion over a year ago, viewed a video on social media that showed Hamas fighters training for the attack through repeated drills inside a mocked-up kibbutz. Egypt warned Israel that Hamas was about to attack days in advance, and that the IDF failed to respond for at least 8 hours after Hamas breached Israel's high-tech smart fence around Gaza, despite receiving an instantaneous alert, prompts the cynic in me to wonder, did the Israeli government let October 7th happen on purpose? What Netanyahu and his colleagues may have asked themselves are a few hundred or even a few thousand Israeli lives compared to the chance to get rid of half the Palestinians in Palestine and get Gaza attached to Israel in the bargain. If so, they miscalculated. U.S. officials have conveyed to their Israeli counterparts that Israel only has a few weeks left before they lose all international support and suffer what they call a strategic defeat after a tactical victory. Israel plans to go on for months. Actually, though, the U.S. assessment is even too optimistic. The die is cast. Defeat for Israel is inevitable. Public opinion is trending in favor of Palestine against Israel. By this point next year, an appalled world, including a huge majority of American voters, will have witnessed the abject misery and injustice of the forced displacement of more than 2 million innocent civilians. Oceans of tents in the desert, screaming orphans, and wounded ex-Gazans will fill high-definition social media and broadcast screens day after disgusting day. Public support for Palestine, already at historically record levels, will be so overwhelming that governments everywhere will find the pressure impossible to ignore. It will no longer be just the usual suspects in the Arab world who issue their formal protests that nobody listens to. No, from Tokyo to Ottawa to Paris to Rome, it's now going to be politically untenable for any government to allow itself to be seen as complicit with the most outrageous war crime since the Vietnam War. Eventually, the U.S. is going to ghost Israel. No more emergency war packages, no more $4 billion a year in military and other foreign aid. Even under a second Trump administration, remember, he's the one who was so pro-Israel that he moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we might recall our ambassador. Israel can't see it yet, but Israel is well on its way to international pariah status, and at a scale which apartheid-era South Africa, its ally during the Cold War, could never have imagined. I'm Ted Rall, political cartoonist, columnist, and graphic novelist. Thanks very much for listening and for watching.